So, welcome back to the Self Actualization Made Simple podcast. In this podcast, we're going to be going over development, how to move through feeling lost, confused, and dealing with nihilism, as well as the building blocks of how introjects, split ego states, and projections are formed and how to correct them. And joining you now is me, Aaron from Self Actualization Systems, and my co host.
Cameron Borthwick, and we're also going to be running through a number of case studies to really try and make this practical for you as you're listening so you can take it into your life. Let me ask you a question, because the curiosity that drove me to think about this was,
Yeah.
we've spoken, and for everyone who's listening, we speak about development. We use, in particular, Terry O'Fallon's stages model is a
Yeah.
great way of understanding the levels that and how you can keep evolving. And there's this transition that I've seen you move through. Not necessarily at the 3.5, but definitely coming to a heavy 4.0 when I
Hmm.
first met you. But there were definitely shades of 3.5,
Yeah.
and then 4.0, and then now a very very solid 4.5. If I'm misrepresenting you, then let me know. But I think that's accurate.
Yeah.
And
I'm
yeah,
more
I'm
like
just curious what.
7.5.
Oh yeah, actually just 9.0. Yeah. But I'm just curious about your experience moving through those different tiers. What was it like in how you understood yourself, the world, how you were thinking, and what you were even moving towards?
Yeah. In some ways, now I really understand why to kind of grade yourself, it is useful, but if you're not ready for it, it's just so unuseful because it just creates such a barrier between you and like other people if you're not careful about it.
Yeah,
I want to know if that's your experience as well. Because you're like, oh yeah, people just don't, they just, you know, you can create such a
100%.
superiority around it, which I think me and you actually did really good jobs at not engaging in, to be honest.
You're so
Um,
good at
yeah.
it.
Yeah, we got so good at it that Cameron thought he was beyond the stages of development
we
and
see,
awakening.
but it was communal. We were both beyond the spiral. Yeah, don't
Well,
worry.
that's what
We're
you
between the
added
two.
later afterwards. Because at the start, it was just you that was beyond the
Yeah.
spiral, and then you started incorporating everyone else around you. But to answer your question, moving through it, you just have like such a sense of like being lost and confused, especially when you get to so like 3.5 is already quite developed. A lot of people in the Western world and people from throughout the world who have probably had a bit more of a middle class, upper class background, because when you're in those environments, you can just your mind can just relax and focus on moving to the next stage rather than just focusing on survival. And you have better access to education. Education is like the driving force. Quality of education is the driving force about how your mind develops, like your actual neurology, like the biological part of it. So if you're from a more wealthy background, from a more wealthy country, from a more developed country, or even if you're not from a developed country, you're able to go to developed schools, then that just allows you to develop a lot quicker and a lot more in a lot more of a mature way. Obviously, it's not black and white. There are people who come from those backgrounds that are really not very developed. So it's just painting in broad
Yeah.
strokes here. But when you move from 3.5 in the stages model, the move to 4.0 is seen as the big leap because you're going from
Mm.
conventional stages to post-conventional stages, right? Now, the definition of a post-conventional stage is that it's not conventional. So when you are going through it, like if you take it really seriously, which I definitely did, if you take it really seriously, then it can make you feel really isolated from everyone
Mm.
because you're thinking in a way which isn't conventional. In other words, it isn't widespread. So it can also, if you're more sensitive to other people's criticisms or worldviews, and you haven't quite developed a groundedness in your own state of being, then it can cause you to question that as well. which just causes even more confusion. You're already thinking in a slightly
Yeah.
different way than elsewhere, and then if you're more sensitive or more agreeable, which I naturally was, to the people around you, then that causes even more confusion because you're like, oh, like
Mm.
it's not because I'm like that's when a little bit of narcissism would be a little bit useful because you'd be
Mm.
like, oh no, I'm just special, right? Like
Yeah, I'm just special.
I'm
Yeah.
just special. I can hold this perspective, and I don't care what other people think. But it's basically, and
Mm.
I'm sure a lot of people with listening to this content, both on your channel and mine, can relate to it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be watching this content. It just wouldn't be appealing for them. They are probably have gone or they're going through this kind of stage where they're starting to think in a different way. Notice how when we say this, me and Cameron, we always use the word different. It's not better. It's not, well, Cameron just done a little bit of a cheeky smile there. So I don't want to speak for him there. But we always try
I
and use
agree
the
with you.
word different,
Yeah.
right? It's more expansive. That's the nature of stages, right? Cameron just keeps on
You're just making me laugh.
Cameron keeps
You
on
know I
looking at
agree with
me
everything you're
with
saying.
such a sneaky smile that I'm like, okay, what's his blind spot here? No, I'm joking. But when something's more expansive, it just means you can see with more comprehension, or more complexity. But there are definitely, I mean, me and Cameron definitely know a few of these characters that think with a lot of complexity that aren't necessarily the character that you would want to be in this world. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's one particular
That's for
person that
sure.
me and Cameron are both thinking of right now, or I think so. But
Yeah.
that's what we mean, basically. It means more expansive. And if something's more expansive and more complex, you have the ability to get more fulfillment from it because there's just more complexity. So there's more layers you can have access to, right? It's like
Mm.
seeing without color versus seeing with color.
Yeah.
They kind of have an impact on the person's happiness, but to say that all people who see with color are more happy or more fulfilled than the people who are colorblind, we can see that that's not necessarily a truism.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I comes up for me. Just this sense of kind of being lost and confused
Mm.
and not really knowing what path to go into. Because then also all the paths, you start to realize that all the paths that have been laid out to you, that have been interjected into you, for lack of a better word, or just put into you, right? They're all conventional. So
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
you kind of have to find your own way too.
Mm.
But I am getting a little bit concerned that maybe we're falling into, or I'm falling into the trap of making it too much of a big deal. But I guess the reason why I'm doing that is because I did make it a big deal when I was going for it. So I'm just relating my experience. It doesn't have to be like
Yeah.
that. But what's
Yeah.
coming up for you?
Well, there's a number of things, but also I just want to get a little bit more specific
Yeah,
for you because I know that you and for people listening this, you probably are aware of the stages model. If not, go and check it out.
yeah,
Um, but the 3.5 is t level is nicknamed the achiever,
yeah,
right? And we often go about life in that way of achieving and trying to create things.
yeah.
And I know for you, when you were very into in 3.5, jujitsu was such a center of
Oh,
life,
wow. Yeah,
right? And you're speaking about confusion, and I'm sure that arose in many ways. But I'm very curious about what was it like going from really competitive athlete. This is the only thing that matters,
yeah.
right? And I'm sure many people who have been through 3.5 to 4.0 change can notice where 3.5 it's really all that matters. Like when you achieve that goal, you're going to be
Then I'll be happy.
happy and everything's
Yeah.
going to be perfect and I'm going to get there. And
It's
then the
almost
breaking
like
of that, yeah, go.
when you make that achievement, suddenly what's going to happen is you're going to be teleported to a beach in the Bahamas with a
Yeah,
beautiful
literally.
family, like all the money in the
Yeah,
bank account. Like that's the
yeah,
illusion that you buy into, you know.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
So I just had that curiosity about what that was like for you in that
yeah.
context.
Yeah, I just thought it's funny because once you examine these things, like a lot of the time, like if you're trapped a little bit in that right now listening to this, something you can do is just don't just stop at the goal in the visualization. Fast forward 5 years or 1 year
Mm,
or 1 month. Because what you'll find is that like these little teleportations that happen in the mind and your like mental framing, the reason why that happens is because they're not built on any substance, you know?
yeah.
Like, well, how did I get to the Bahamas?
Mm,
Did that happen straight after
yeah.
I walked off the mats after I won Worlds? I shook someone's hand and then it was like a genie and then suddenly I'm there? No,
That's how it works.
right? But it's basically about because you're using this new technology, like when you move from 3.0 to 3.5, um, you're essentially every time you move up a developmental stage, you unlock all of this new technology. Now in 1.0 to 2.5, that's a concrete technology. Um, 3.0 to 4.5, I believe, is a subtle technology, right? So it's something that is not concretely observed, it's subtly made. And then after that is
Mm,
meta-aware technology. But the shift from first 3.0 to 3.5 is like a subtle technology. You are now able to create a goal within yourself and then use that to externally motivate yourself. Now you can let's make this very clear. It's not like you were never able to do something like this beforehand. It's just that now this is just where the center of gravity is. And this now becomes your North Star, your guiding light. So it's a cool thing to play around with, right? The whole point of being in that stage is so you get good at that, being able to do that and achieve all that kind of stuff. Um, but it's almost the confusion that arises, excuse me, the confusion that arises out of that stage is, well, I've already achieved things that I thought would have made me happy in the past and that they haven't.
mm,
That's the confusion that arises out of it. And
yeah.
then, like with every developmental shift, there's a path you can take here. You can either go into that confusion, which leads to soul searching, um, feeling confused, feeling lost, feeling like your entire personality is on shaky ground, all of this kind of stuff, right? Or you don't, and you just stay in that paradigm, basically, and you just create mental workarounds. Um, so for me, when that stage really took place, I completely quit jujitsu,
Mm,
and I haven't been back since. It's like a full like regular training, you know. I'll still wrestle Cameron every once in a while, but that's just, something extra.
that's right.
Yeah. But for you, you had it something a little bit different, right? Obviously, you weren't grinding in jiu-jitsu like you are now. Um,
Mm,
if
that's
anyone wants to come down to the open mat with Cameron there,
right.
he's open to all challenges in his jiu-jitsu
Okay.
journey. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you weren't grinding with jiu-jitsu. But for you, I mean, I guess photography wasn't it, but it was more around building the business that you had before. There was something around
Yeah.
with that. And then I also noticed in you there was some steady kind of sharp changes when you were moving through this shift. Because it seems like when we first met, you were really deep into that, but you were very open. You weren't like stuck deep. You were open to what other stuff that was coming, like other influences, obviously mentors, all that kind of thing. But did you relate to it in the same way? Did you make it a big deal like I did? Like, what was kind
Oh,
of
for
your
sure.
experience of it? Yeah.
I made it the biggest deal. And I
Yeah,
remember, because then what started to happen is because I was in this odd phase of when I really at the beginning first learn about this, still very 3.5
yeah,
in lots of ways. But, I was learning about integral theory and hypnotherapy and um, all of this amazing things and even meditation. And so it was interesting that lots of aspects of the mind were really moving into higher levels, high developmental levels.
Mhm.
Yet there was still a very big part that was using these things in a 3.5 way. You know, we did a very deep style of meditation called TWIM, and we were able to work with Sister Kama, who was literally, senior Buddhist nuns, almost like
Yeah.
second in command of that group. And she
Yeah.
was living with us for 2 years and directly giving us this really amazing way of working with the mind.
Yeah.
And yet, in many ways, lots of my 3.5 at the time hijacked that
Yeah.
intention and that goal. And so while lots of content was able to just move up and just evolve, I still got really this concept of going through, right? Because those stages of the meditation, I got really obsessed with. I have to go through. I have to get to that level. And then
Yeah.
even with the integral stuff, I was trying to push so hard to get into high developmental levels, 4.5 and 4.0 and beyond. But it was from this subtle, we spoke about the Enneagram last week,
Mhm.
often almost the three, right? The number three in me, which is also nicknamed Achiever or something like this,
Yeah. Something like
mixed
that.
with the 3.5 Achiever developmental stage and just had
Oh,
a real,
that's a fun
they had a
time.
lot of fun,
Yeah.
they went real hard.
Yeah.
And so, the
So if I can
3.5,
just add
go,
some context here, for those of you that aren't too hot on the Enneagram, basically what that means is Cameron already had a, correct me if I'm wrong, susceptibility or extra sensitivity or blind spot to maybe mental patterns or meaning makings around, I have to achieve this in order to be good enough, to put it really, really
yeah,
colloquially, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So when they combined, it was like, all right,
Yeah.
this- that's a big, like that's, where there was a lot of patterns really emerged in that 3.5.
Hmm.
And even a lot later, the trailing edge, right? 'Cause for anyone who doesn't know too much about this, we kind of have a center of gravity where the main part of our consciousness sits in one of these levels, and then we have our leading edge, right, where the highest or most evolved part of our consciousness and our trailing edge, kind of the parts that are slightly dragging behind. So there was still 3.5 dragging along for a fair while. So it would always arise some of those interesting patterns. But and so there was this confusion of a lot of content going 4.0 and 4.5 in some ways,
Hmm.
and but a lot of the underlying meaning making staying from a subtle 3.5 way,
Hmm.
which is really interesting to look back and see that and see how that's such a trap as well.
Yeah.
And how, you know, we just spoke about someone who got more and more complexity,
Hmm.
and very often shadow or just sensitive constructs can hijack
Yeah.
really much higher levels of thinking,
Yeah.
but they use it through their own understanding.
So now you've been through that, do you have any clients that maybe you've worked with or you're working with right now that are going through maybe a
Mm,
similar catalyst of change that we bring up to mind so we can
yeah,
look at it from an outside
yeah,
perspective?
yeah, for sure. So there's a really amazing client. He's very, very successful externally, and he's just fantastic because he's also very driven when it comes to doing the work, which is great. Now,
Yeah.
what I've noticed is sometimes he can fall into trying to achieve the states, right? These higher state experiences that might come
Mhm.
out of shadow work.
Okay.
And There's always a subtle trying to progress, right? There's nothing wrong with progressing or evolution, but it's always like, how can I progress more? How can I do it more
Yeah.
correctly? How can I do it better?
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting thing that because lots of his mind very, evolving through all of this work, right? Able to really experience some really powerful states continuously and use it within the work he's doing. It's just really integrated. Yet when we're doing work, there's this subtle, needing to progress, just tones of 3.5,
Mm.
which show up. And so it's really interesting because that's the part of him that's seeing what he often wants to work with is more of the content, which is already evolving and growing. And so sometimes it's just that gentle bringing into almost being curious about what's happening there, what's happening with the part of him that's seeing that, but seeing it through this lens that maybe isn't the highest evolution of who he can be.
And what's happening
And
when
so
he's
that's been a
seeing
really
that?
interesting experience. Well, what tends to happen is he gets like glimpses
Mm.
of this arising and just comes into awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And then what's great is a lot of the content that had previously, self-liberated into maybe some real lightness and peace and all of this, then starts to be able to do that with this system as well. And so I don't tend to point it out or anything, but it's just really beautiful to witness.
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed with him, he's just getting a lot more of a 4.0 perspective on how he's viewing life. It's like the lens is starting to shift,
Mm.
right? And the lens is starting to, color itself within that 4.0 tone.
Yeah.
And so that's how it's been arising. Um,
How's that making a difference to him? Like, how is he showing up
yeah,
when he's able to
one of the
access
one of the
that?
biggest ones on just a really external level is his horizon becomes a lot more holistic.
Yeah.
It's not just revenue and results. I mean, that's still integrated within,
Yeah.
thankfully. But he's really like been able to focus on, I'm actually gonna get really good sleep,
Yeah.
right? I'm gonna optimize so that I have time during the day. And so I can be with my relationship. I can be in all these other areas. And I suppose what's the way I would describe it is has been a softening. It's not so much about just reaching that goal. And even with the work we're doing, what's emerged is like an enjoyment of the evolution rather than a deep need to get somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
which is fantastic because it takes the pressure off. And what it does is it really stops creating more suffering. You
Mm-hmm.
can, you can progress in the states till the end of time,
Yeah.
but if you're never there, it's always going to be creating suffering. Is always going to be a problem.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, first of all, if anything arises for you around this, but also if you've experienced it with any of the clients you're working with.
Well, I think it speaks to this idea of people learning maybe states too early because it's just
Mm,
going to, I mean, for us, it definitely caused a lot of craving, right? I guess you could call it a wholesome
yeah,
craving because there's a difference between craving jhanic states versus craving going to the strip club every Monday and Wednesday or something, right? There's a difference when it comes to the cravings that you can have. But that's why I think it is shadow work is so important straight away
Mm,
because it's the removing of and allowing something to arise naturally rather than trying to implant a state, which is what it sounds like you're doing. In terms of my clients, I have people that I have a couple of guys that have kind of been going through, well, all of my clients, let me rephrase that. All of my clients either have gone or are going through this stage, basically. And they all go through it obviously in very different personal ways. But the main principle which seems to arise for them is almost like this fear of doing anything um, money or achievement related because
mm,
they've been in that worldview before and there was so much stress and there was so much worry and so much anxiety that it almost scared them so much to go back into it. And these are all successful guys
yeah.
working in fintech, software, corporate finance. One of them is like a big time personal trainer, right? These are all successful guys as well. So it's not like they went through that worldview and it just completely ruined them. No, they went through that worldview and they did very well. And yet there's still that fear of going back. So a lot of the
Yeah.
time when I work with them, it's about realizing that there's another way. We're not going back, we're going forward. And it's
Mm,
integrating all the lessons from that stage with the stage that they're at right now, which is about checking in, harmonizing with yourself. What that means is
yeah.
basically actually having a real conversation with all the different parts of yourself without at the
Mm,
expense of not being able to do any work. Like, oh, there's this part that feels really bad doing this work. No,
mm,
if you have to do that work, then we can work with that. Then we can just push through it and then we work with it later. But
yeah.
it's almost like there's this leap of faith that people have to go through where they have to accept that that is a possibility. And then, like with all paths, you find your footing as you go. But you can't pre-plan something if you've never been there before.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm there obviously to give them the right frameworks, but it's a doing practice as well. It's trusting, hey, I got all the lessons from that stage, from the achievement stage, the lessons from this, and now I'm moving forward. And I'm not doing either of those, but I've integrated both of them, and then a new path arises from there, basically.
Mm,
But yeah, I mean, that was the same for me. There was this weird fear around going back into that paradigm, like so much resistance, and
yeah.
it's all just
Yeah.
self-created. That's the funny
Oh,
thing,
for
like
sure.
everything. But it was so self-created around like, oh yeah, but then it'll be like this, and it's like, no, sometimes you need somebody there, and that's why my mentor was really important as
Mm,
well, to point out like, no, there's this path as well. That's always really valuable
yeah.
for me. And then you just lean in and you do it. And sometimes from the stage that comes after the achiever stage, the pluralist stage, you can almost get this weird sensitivity or weird reaction to any kind of like negative emotion. If
Mm,
kind of like a shadow side of that stage, where oh, if this doesn't feel right, then this is somehow the wrong thing to do. So it's also about
yeah.
having the right psychoeducation there to be like, no, like we do not have to be reactive to our feelings or ourself any more than reactive to my thoughts or the barista that was pissy at me in the morning for no reason,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know? I think that was something that's really valuable for all of the guys that I helped through that stage is realizing that, wait, I can not only do I not have to go back to that part, that achiever stage, but there's actually a path that comes after that that is way
Mm,
stronger, softer. When I say softer, it's just more subtle and way more sustainable. So you actually are more productive now than you were back
yeah.
then.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
just looks different.
Yeah. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've been noticing that. And it's so wonderful helping people really mature in 4.0
Yeah.
because they can avoid a lot of the pitfalls. When you see people going into 4.0 without any practice or mentorship, often
You can
the
get
the
stuck there
pitfalls
for
and the
ages.
challenges become, yeah, it gets really, really tough,
Yeah.
and they kind of just reinforce those beliefs.
This is where
And
nihilism
what's
comes up.
oh
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I find interesting is with 4.0, so often the because you've just been in action so much in 3.5, the
Have you got a pen
allergy
in your
to,
hand?
yeah, I like it. It's my Apple Pen.
Ah,
It's my
nice.
favorite thing for just like saying things and pretending that I'm pointing at something, but actually I'm not. It
I
just
was
makes you
getting
feel
excited that you were
more
bringing a
focused.
whiteboard out. I was
I
getting
I
hyped.
we bring kind of imaginary that whiteboard, which
Nice.
is inaccurate, so we can all follow
Perfect.
along with that.
We can
But
train
anyway,
our minds together for that
that's
imagination.
right. We can train our minds. Talking of training minds, I've completely forgotten what I was saying. What was I saying?
Sorry, I got so excited that you're going to bring a whiteboard out that I interjected
Yeah,
there. No, we were just talking
mature folk.
about
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
mature.
Yeah. I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so they just create more and more of their own pitfalls. Here we go. Yeah. The aversion to action, that was huge. I don't know if you, it seemed like you were able to be more graceful with that, but maybe I was misreading it
I was
because
a good
you're
actor.
probably more of a, yeah, yeah, you're more of an
Yeah.
internal processor as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
Which is interesting. But for me, the experience was like, oh, peace and spirituality and all of this cool stuff that I'm now doing as a 4.0 pluralist, that's just some relaxation. Action is like different to that, like creating some huge
Ah,
boundary
yeah.
where action
Oh, I
is
remember
away
that.
from that a little bit,
Yeah.
right? And specific action, because we were doing long sits, right, with
Yeah.
meditation. So that was
One
in
and a
the
half hour
okay
was a short
action.
sit for us. That was like a
Yeah,
normal sit.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That was just what we did 'cause we were so cool back there.
Yeah, that's right. Join
But
the boot camp.
yeah, but then the aversion. And I remember, now I've been doing a lot of this work with Kim, you have too. He says something that I really love, which is, how are you creating that? Right? How are you
Mm,
generating that? And I realized
interesting.
looking back, I was generating all that resistance around action because I
Mm,
created some construct that action was bad and hard and, you know, it's not peaceful and spiritual.
yeah.
And at the beginning, that may be true just because that reality is so fixed and that can generate a lot of resistance and you have to push through it a little bit.
I don't think the
But there
bhakti
really is a,
yoga helped with this blind spot.
oh, no, no, it did
Yeah.
not. That did not help. It was fun, but it did not help with this blind spot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just go with all the places that you feel good and
Yeah.
avoid anything that feels bad.
Yeah,
Not
basically.
the best way of
Because
being in the world.
if you'd have been introduced to karma yoga or karmic yoga, that's literally the yoga of action.
Mm,
So
yeah,
maybe this spiritual blind spot wouldn't have been developed for you in the same way, being exposed to that.
yeah, yeah. And it's it's really interesting because when you're able to break through that, and it is like pushing, like you said, pushing through a little resistance at the beginning,
Mm,
and even as you move through a little bit, because there'll be boundaries of that.
yeah.
But then you can work with the construct,
Yeah.
and it can just become just so
You can
much
just
fun,
no longer have that
you
construct,
know? Yeah,
you know?
and action can just be great. Like
Yeah.
I'm working with someone right now. He's a really, really wonderful person, and but he's been very, very successful in. Um, Look, actually, I'm not going to say too many specifics, but he's doing really well, and he manages multiple teams.
Nice.
And he always felt it had to be done a certain way, right? And so a lot of his 4.0 that was emerging kind of resisted to action because it had to look like this. And that was very much out of alignment with
Mm,
how he likes to engage in action. But what clicked was when that dropped away. There were things that he still had to do a certain way, but it was almost like he couldn't see all of this. And he suddenly started working for 12 hours when he was presenting to the team, he started presenting it all like symbolically. He would like create this amazing stuff he would just draw out. And what happened is the teams just started to fly. You know, they just did really, really well learning this way. And so
Mm.
the action became more effective. But because previously action looked like this, it was very rigid and it was very
Yeah.
much, you know, it has to be done this way. You make this boring presentation, you review this many calls, you do it this way.
Yeah.
It was killing the creativity. But when that broke for him, and we were working with it symbolically, it was like this rising tide, right? It was like this real peace
Mm.
coming to 4.0, then this rising tide. And he just got so much energy
Mm.
to play with that, to do that all day.
Mhm.
And he was getting like in a playful way annoyed when he had to do calls because he wanted to go and work on this,
Wow.
right?
Okay.
Which ended up being really useful for his teams and actually the
Yeah.
business as a whole. But I think that's almost the mature 4.0 or even 4.5 energy that comes out that is just so fun
So what was the
and
big shift
so
between,
energetic.
because you just said a word
Um,
there, if I could just say this, where you said the mature 4.0.
mm,
I'm interested to see what was that switch where you went from immature to mature when you were working together?
yeah, yeah. So it was definitely very subtle because I really love working with the light work. And so we were just, we worked for a shadow completely unrelated to any of this.
Yeah. That's how it is.
And this real piece was emerging, right? And what happened is he was kind of having this split, right? Where there was this piece and then there was this um, almost trading part. But still had lots of positive intentions, right? That wanted to just do action, but it kind of wanted to what I had to do in the old way. And so what happened is that piece, which was really mature, it was this beautiful symbolic part, started to include the other part,
Mhm.
right? Not in a equal way where they're both just as important, because while they're both just as important, this piece had a real maturity,
Mm.
right? That listened and it included that part. And what started to emerge, and this was all symbolic, but the effects were very real. The effects were those, 12 hours of really creating amazing things for his team.
Mhm.
And it just emerged as this rising tide, I
Mm.
think is how he described it.
Yeah.
And it was almost like that click symbolically just showed him that it didn't have to be this peace and action
Yeah.
in some kind of conflict,
Yeah.
but he could be with this real deep peace that he really appreciated, with this real relaxation and freedom while being active in the world,
Mm.
while creating for his team and leading them. And it was almost like that boundary, which is very a 4.0 boundary
Mm.
of action is kind of out there, and this is peaceful and spiritual, whatever it may be. And when that was integrated and there was no boundary, there was no wall, there was real freedom instead of that binary.
Mhm.
It just, he had unlimited energy.
Yeah. Did this affect any other areas of his life other than just this the teams stuff?
Yeah, I think previously he had been in a little bit of a haze,
Mm.
like throughout life. There was a little bit of soft nihilism, right? Like, I'm not really that motivated to do this. I don't really want to do that. I'm
Yeah.
not bothered, kind of thing, which
Yeah.
is supernatural. We all move through it when we're going through this. There doesn't need to be judgment for it. But it's
Mhm.
not maybe the most alive way of being in the world. And what emerged out of this was just this aliveness. He had really creative ambition with we wanted to do within his teams, within what he was already doing. But even outside of that, he started to kind of go out more with friends, to do more crazy adventures, just to live more, really. I think that was a big shift,
Mm.
going from a little bit of that haze, a little bit of that, what's the point? What's the matter
Yeah.
to? It doesn't matter
Yeah.
that much, but it's fun and I enjoy it and I'm just engaging with aliveness as it arises.
Yeah. Also with
And
that,
that's, yeah, go on.
if I can just add on to that, if you ever find yourself falling a little bit into nihilism or this kind of thing that Cameron is describing, most likely you're falling into it, well, almost all the time. I can't really think of an example where this wouldn't be the case, but I'm sure it's out there. It's because you're making that mean a lot. Like,
Mm,
oh, like this doesn't really matter that much. Well, if we're gonna make this fair, then the fact that it doesn't matter that much also doesn't matter that much,
yeah,
right? That's
yeah.
the blind spot here, which nihilism doesn't
Mm,
really take into account. And I remember it's very useful to hear that somebody say that, but obviously there's an embodied insight that comes with that, that comes a bit more naturally if you have a
yeah.
good mentor, good resources, all that kind of stuff. When that happens, it's such a liberation. You're like, oh my
Mm,
God, like I can actually just do something like, yeah, it might not matter that much, but I want to do this and it's fun.
yeah,
And it
yeah.
creates so much energy and
Oh,
motivation for people. Like, if I can just piggyback this for a moment, it's one of this is about 6 months ago, well, not 6 months, 6 months ago to a year, one of my clients I've been working with for a couple of years had this really big breakthrough. And like we've been working together for a while, so he's had a few really big breakthroughs, but this is one of the bigger ones. It's when he actually made this shift that we're just talking about right now. And he went from living with his parents, maybe traveling around a little bit aimlessly, just living off this money which he's made from exiting fintech, right? From this really big software company. He'd been living on years on this money, right? So he made a big amount. He went from that to not really to being a bit more of this stereotypical wishy-washy kind of persona, which is fine, right? People can go through that, but most of the time, I think the people that are listening to this probably don't want to fall too much into that worldview. A lot of the new age spirituality, kind of very flowy, that kind
yeah,
of stuff, has its place. I actually the people that are really genuine in that space, I really like to be around because they're just fun to be
yeah,
around and really nice to
yeah,
be around. But if you're listening to this, most likely you don't want that to be the end goal. He went from that to now creating, starting up, and running his own business, living in the places that he wants to live, and no longer having to live with his parents or live in that kind of in that
yeah,
reality anymore because now he's able to actually take action whilst integrating all of the softness and the chilling outness, that lovely chilling outness of 4.0 pluralist. He's able to use that so that he can rest and recover and take care of himself in the correct way while still going out and pushing it and crushing it. And the main way he's doing that is by meeting people in person. The one way which you can't
yeah.
fake that energy.
Mm,
And people can feel it on him because he's kind of in. I'm not going to say the country that he's in at the moment. He's kind of in the country stereotypically that attracts those types of people. It attracts people who are in the flow spirituality type, to the traders, to the all of the different online hustles you can have. Basically, I'll put it like that. And in the place that he's staying in, it's like a co-living place. Like all the feedback he's getting from people is his energy is just grounded in a way which isn't robotic and soft in a way which isn't in La La Land. And when you put those two together, then people just naturally start to ask him for advice. to want to do sessions with him, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, if you don't want to be a coach, what that means is you just kind of, if you go through these phases properly with the right guidance, all that kind of stuff, you
Mm.
become so much more powerful, for lack of a better term. I'm not sure if you have a better term for this, Cameron, in a way which doesn't have any of the drawbacks of what power was before, right? If that makes
Yeah.
sense. Like you just have so much more of an impact. Like you are going through these stages because they each teach you a lesson. And if you
Mm.
integrate it, they teach you more than one lesson, obviously. If you integrate it, then you just become so much better. So embracing that lostness, that confusion, all that stuff that we've been talking about is actually, it feels like you're taking a step back, but it's actually the way to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you were speaking about it a little bit earlier. And I'm curious when we notice the generating of the meaninglessness.
Yeah.
And that's such a powerful insight of it's meaningless. And then we add all of this stuff.
Yeah.
It's kind of meaningless. So that means I don't care. I'm going to create lethargy.
Yeah.
I'm going to
Yeah.
create tiredness.
Mhm.
I'm going to just not do anything. Right.
Yeah.
So that's
Creating
all
tiredness is
just
a
other
big one.
stories. Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, so many people in that stage, I experienced it a lot too. Just feel like tired all the time, like a little
Yeah.
haze
Yeah.
from this kind of nihilistic um, creation of reality,
Yeah.
this nihilistic view.
Yeah.
And so we touched on it for the guy I'm working with, but I'm wondering was there a moment with this client when it started to break around
Yeah.
this?
Yeah. The way you described it and what came up symbolically for your client actually sums up the exact same process. It's funny how similar it
Mm,
was. It was like a rising tide, and it was just
yeah,
building, 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 building. So maybe on the outside it went 1 to 100, but because of obviously the nature of the work that me and Cameron do, and this guy's very developed as well. He's a mentor and a coach in his own right now. No surprises there. This thing had been rising, this thing of agentiveness, of agency, of activeness was coming back into the fold, being able to hold himself fully in being receptive and also active at the same time, coming together so that there's no longer this division. Usually, a good rule of thumb is if you ever find yourself creating a boundary or division within yourself, that's something to go and do shadow work on, to do construct work
yeah,
on. If you have Cameron's number, that's something to bring up with him in a call, in a coaching call, right? Because usually it's in those divisions and boundaries which you think are so real, they're just a complete illusion. Or if it's internally inside of you, it is an illusion because this is all unified. We just break it down and compartmentalize it to understand it a little bit better. But it was like a rising tide. Like the reason why I said it was about a year to 6 months ago is because it was kind of in that 6 months difference process that rising tide was really building. And it wasn't like,
right.
no, it was like, it's almost like that rising tide. It builds all of the internal foundations within you. Like if you've ever gotten burnt out, one of the ways, there's like a million different ways it could happen, but one of the ways I'm sure a lot of people can relate to is just because you start or you embark on something which internally you just weren't ready for.
Mm,
Like it's too complex, it's too difficult. It's just you just didn't have the internal foundation to sustain that workflow. So it's almost like this rising tide was building up within him, and you could see it in how he was asking me questions, getting more active on the calls, right? A lot of the time, people in this stage, they're just happy to reciprocate and be a bit more passive, and that for them is really useful and valuable for them. Obviously, we had quite a lot of breakthroughs before that, so obviously stuff was happening. but it was in a much more of a different way. But he was coming up with topics to the call. He was getting more engaged, getting more active. He was doing more. He wanted more doing homework, which I was more than more happy to give. He actually started taking actions to setting up, owning, starting his own business, right? And then it's almost like that moment hit, and then all of it went. He chose to go live in this new place, moved out, started getting clients, all this kind of stuff. And it's like, the funny thing is when you move somewhere, people don't have any recollection of who you were beforehand. So when he showed up, they just thought he was always like this,
Yeah.
right? Which is a really nice kind of fun thing. Like if you have the opportunity to do this, it's kind of funny. If you ever had a good big kind of personality level change, if you just go to a different country or a place where people don't even know you, people just interact with you way different because this
Mm,
person that you're presenting, this person that you are right now, is who they've only ever known. So they don't have any preconceived notions of you. It's actually a really good litmus test to see how well, like where exactly you are in the eyes of other people. But
yeah.
he was doing this. It's really fun, all this kind of stuff, and then we did a retreat a little bit after that. Worked a lot on groundedness and kind of vibe cultivation, for lack of a better word. Like actually the impact of somebody in person, because it's very different than even over internet like this. Like actually being able to have that impact in person. He went back, saw lots of differences with that, but it was this rising tide, exactly like you said, with your client. It's like building, building, building. For me and him, it was almost like a like there it was rising, strengthening him internally, and then he was able to move forward, and he hasn't burnt out or anything since. It's just been a continuous, steady, not just steady productivity, but increasing productivity.
Yeah. That's wonderful.
Does that ring any bells for you and the person you're working with, or someone, maybe even someone different?
Yeah. It just brings me back to that concept of with the developmental stuff. It's a great thing to touch on to be aware of a little bit,
Hmm.
but doing the right kind of shadow work or construct work,
Yeah,
the 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 evolution happens organically.
yeah, it really does.
It's just when we remove those sensitivities and constructs, it becomes very natural to not create a boundary between action and receiving.
Yeah,
It's just be in that real reciprocity,
yeah,
right? And to just be playing with life in that way.
yeah,
And so, even thinking about this previous client, but also a number of others, it's really wonderful that you'll be working on very separate things. Sometimes you're working on relationship stuff, more often than not business stuff.
hmm,
And yet, through that context, they'll just start having changes that correlate within these
like a whole
different
other
brackets.
topic.
Yeah,
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 because there
yeah,
is no division within us, you know?
yeah,
Like, how we
yeah,
make sense of
exactly.
one thing usually has a knock-on effect of how we make sense of another thing,
Yeah.
right? It's actually funny, like, when I started making breakthroughs with blogs around business and making money, had, like, the El Clasicos, one of which is, "It's wrong to ask people for money," which is
Ah,
very
that
a
is an
very
El
common one.
Clasico.
That's an El Clasico if ever I've heard one, right? This was, like, a couple years ago when I was living in Thailand. Um, when I got rid of that, first of all, it touches on what we were talking about. I felt like I had a lot more energy and empowerment, obviously, right? Because I don't have this negative belief like, oh, this introject weighing me down like an anchor. But I also, funnily enough, I'm not just saying this out of, um, I'm not just saying this willy nilly. I was already at this point very confident, not because I was naturally like that, but because me and Cameron literally worked on it for half a decade with the top mentors in that space. right? Underground mentors. Um, but what's funny is I felt a noticeable difference in confidence after that. Like this was
Mm,
not a pain point for me at all. If anything, it was something I
yeah,
was very secure in because of the nature of the training that me and Cameron both received and our life journey. Obviously, going from a place of really, really not being confident to colloquially saying confident. And it's because, well, of course, if I have this insecurity anywhere when it comes to any kind of conversation, part of a conversation is asking for something, right? At
yeah,
some point in a friendship or a relationship
yeah,
or just an acquaintanceship, an acquaintanceship, whatever you want to call it, you have to ask for something. So if I
mm,
have this, even if it's just something specifically around money, but it doesn't quite create that division, it hasn't quite created that boundary between asking for something and asking something specifically for money. It just views it as asking for something. Suddenly, as soon as you
yeah,
get rid of that, you feel a noticeable difference in how empowered and confident you show up in day-to-day interactions. That was one of the times where I was like, "Oh, yeah," like, it really cemented and hit home for me. There are no divisions. Like,
yeah,
how you make meaning in one way, either is how you make meaning in something else, or it will have a knock-on effect of how you make meaning, like almost like a butterfly effect in the ecosystem within you.
yeah. I suppose it's like in that situation, I'm hearing there was this content of money and this sort of a thing, but the underlying structure was a very innate part of life, part of conversation, of course, but just receiving and
Mhm,
asking.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
so I'm curious, you noticed it with competence, you noticed it with the money thing. Did it show up in anything else that was obvious?
Well, it just helped me asking for things in general. And it's funny, I
Mm.
didn't even realize I had a problem with asking for things.
Yeah, it's
You only
strange.
realize it once it goes. You're like, "Oh, wait, like,
Yeah,
I did have, like, a weird mental checklist I had to go through, and everything had to be ticked off in order for me to feel like I could ask something, just in general."
yeah,
Even, like,
same.
just asking yeah, it was like a weird like, it was a weird thing, I didn't realize I had it until it came up. That's the other cool thing, like, you'll get rid of problems which you didn't even know were there, which would have
Yeah,
just come up
yeah,
later.
yeah,
Did you ever have anything like that in these last couple of years?
for sure.
Or have you just moved
My
past the
mind is not
spiral?
bringing it up. I've just moved past as far. That's what it is. That's what I'm thinking right now. Like,
Yeah.
what do you mean you have problems? Who even has problems nowadays,
That's
right?
right. If you wanna get the real
Uh,
mastery coaching, then you gotta hit up Cameron.
yeah. Um, Let me think. I mean, what springs to mind a little bit has been in somewhat of a similar way. The content was similar around the money, and it was a content of I need to reach X income, whatever revenue that may be, to be good enough to,
Oh, I remember this.
come up in yeah, it comes up in weird contexts. An interesting was when I got into a relationship, it started to really come up a lot more. It's like, oh, now I need to make this amount so that I'm this perfect
Yeah, I remember talking about this with you.
boyfriend or husband or whatever.
Yeah,
And so
so interesting.
the I need money kind of thing really ignited again.
Yeah, yeah,
This was a few years ago now. But when I broke through that, which sounds like just a money thing and a little bit of relationship stuff, it just something completely changed on a fundamental level around worthiness.
yeah,
It didn't even feel like that. That's like the word that would maybe label it. But it was more, there was just so much out here,
mm,
just came back to me. So much energy that was being projected out. So
mm,
much thinking about the future in a way of I need to get there, I need to get there, I need to get there,
Yeah.
just came back to me. And like you said, confidence isn't the right word, but I just security is probably a better word.
Yeah.
I felt such a security and such a not a need to get anywhere in particular.
Yeah.
Right? Still a desire to evolve, still a desire to grow the business, but it became so practical. It was just like, it would be cool to have some extra money to go on some more retreats, to work with really cool people, to get a really nice house.
Yeah.
But it became very practical. It's like, I want this, I need this money. But
Yeah.
the stories about what it means about me, the glorification, that when, like you said, when you're going to get off the mat, you're going to be transported to some beach
Yeah.
and everyone's just going to love you,
Yeah.
right? All of that stuff just dissipated. It's like, oh, that's stupid. That doesn't matter. It's
No.
just,
Yeah.
if I get some more money, it's great. I'm going to, as I've got more money, I can do more things. It's great. It's wonderful. But I haven't changed.
Yeah.
Maybe
No.
through the journey of growing in business, I've
Yeah.
changed, but not through the acquiring of money.
Yeah.
And so when that dropped away, it was such a security. And we spoke about the Enneagram. It was like so much of the achiever Enneagram dropped away of, oh, I don't need this. I don't even need the perfect relationship to be
Mm.
enough. That one dropped too. It was like two at the same time of trying to
Yeah.
be perfect with money for the relationship, but also trying to have the perfect relationship to be worthy or good enough or secure or whatever it may be. So
Mm.
when that dropped away, just so the somatic experience was intense.
Yeah.
It was like the strangest wholeness, but in
Mm.
a way of when before I had been trying to embody wholeness and it was
Yeah.
falling flat in comparison.
Yeah.
It was just and it was almost like I was having all of these TVs, all of these holograms and future projections that just suddenly turned off,
Mm. Yeah.
which was just fascinating to see.
Yeah. Do you know what's coming up for me? Your story just sparked this for me.
Yeah.
It's a question or discussion slash question. Like we like me and you. We never talked about this, but I'm sure you'll know the types of people I'm talking about. The people that seem really well-meaning, obviously very successful, the kind of a bit more mainstream manosphere podcast type characters that seem to have gotten to the realization that wait, achievement isn't going to make me happy, but yet they still keep on living in that paradigm. A curiosity that just came from me is what do you think makes that happen? Because there's nothing wrong with staying in that paradigm for the rest of your life. I'm not trying to say that we're better or anything like that. I'm just saying that they've already had the realization, but there seems to be a real lack of follow through with
Yeah.
actually moving to the more pluralistic stage, even though otherwise it might seem like they're quite open to it, really. At least from the way that they
Mm.
present themselves on camera. I don't actually know them until I met them. Maybe it might become a lot more clear then. I wonder what keeps some people stuck from moving past it. I've got an idea, which is it might be because if you spend so long creating such an identity around being the achiever and then being good at it, it just creates so much more attachment that you have to drop in order to move forward to this stage, which really is quite the antithesis for it. So it's almost like if you were to
Yeah.
fully move into that stage, your entire reputation would be like assassinated, basically,
Mm.
because you become the
Yeah.
person. If you made all of your livelihood and identity on productivity and
Yeah.
being someone who's crushing it all the time, and suddenly you allow yourself to go into maybe this new softer space for a bit, doesn't mean you have to let go of your business or anything like that. Of course, it doesn't mean that. But it means that if you do
Yeah.
go into that, those ideas are going to naturally just emerge a bit more for you. And because they emerge naturally
Mm.
for you, you'll talk about them a bit more because they're more engaging to you. I wonder
Yeah.
makes that process a little bit stifled for someone in your view?
Mm. You know, I wonder if it's similar to what we spoke about earlier, with more of a little bit of that Enneagram 3 journey of it. Both the achiever and the free get so attached to that achievement, but it shows up even in the subtlest of ways, even as the content moves on,
Mm,
if that makes sense. Like the
yeah,
structure maybe isn't fully moved away from that. So my guess would be that their content has evolved, but their mind is still creating similar stories, just with new words and
yeah,
constructs a little bit. That would be my guess. I'm sure it's different for it depending on the person, but I suppose that kind of comes back to the content structure of when we really make structural change. I'm sure you've noticed it with clients, and we can't do magic here. Sometimes we have to work with content a little bit,
yeah,
but sometimes the structure emerges to be healed. And when that happens, it's like a whole different game.
yeah,
And I'm curious if, yeah, if that kind of rings any bells in you of experiences you've had or with clients or just noticing the shift in structure versus content. So that would be
yeah.
my guess.
I think this is a good place to kind of finish up after we conclude this, because
Yeah.
what's coming up for me when you say that is, for someone who's listening, there's a few ways you can look at your shadow or your constructs that are coming up. One, two are exactly like Cameron said, or three are exactly like Cameron said, which is the content of it. Like, what is the actual contents of this belief, or what, or this part, or whatever it is? Like, what is it? Like, whenever you ask a what question, that's the contents. The second is structure. Like, how is this shadow, this belief, this construct structured? In other ways, like, how is it built? How was it built? How is it affecting the rest of me? Like, these things don't happen in isolation. They're affecting everything. Third one is, how did it generate, or how do we generate? Like Cameron said. And the fourth one is actually something that I came up with, or I'm sure other people have talked about it before, but I haven't heard anyone talk about it, is how we then sustaining this construct, or how are we sustaining this belief? Because it's not like a one and done thing. Like, you don't just think something and then suddenly that's with you for the rest of your life. Like, it's sustained throughout you in all this kind of stuff. So you need to knock out all of these four pillars of the stool that you're sitting on, basically. Sometimes you just knock out one and it falls over, and then the rest of them go. But if we want to be strategic about this, or we want to do this in the most effective way possible, you kind of have to look at all four of these principles to really get to the root of whatever problem you're facing. So maybe if you're looking at somebody who seems to have all of the ingredients to to go to the next stage, whatever that means, in anything. Can even be a skill-based thing, like go to the next stage, maybe in jiu-jitsu or whatever. It's probably because one of these four things is still being held up, so the insight maybe can pierce three of these legs, but there's still one leg holding the rest of it up. That's just
Yeah.
what came up spontaneously for me. Do you have anything else to say on that, or do you think that's a good place to wrap up?
I think that's a brilliant metaphor that you just came up with on the spot. This
Yeah,
is why
thank you
people
so
should
much.
work with you. Insights like this. I
Yeah.
haven't even heard about fourth one. Brand new for me.
Yeah, thank you. Sometimes my genius surprises myself. That was a joke,
Yeah.
everyone. I don't actually I don't actually speak about myself in that way.
We should clip that and just remove
Yeah.
the end bit.
So, if you're on my channel, watching this on my channel, I have Cameron's channel linked below. Please go and check it out. If you like my content, you're definitely gonna enjoy. Here's I have my one-on-one link below, but more importantly, I have my most practical guide to shadow work on the internet. This is your Bible to shadow work, basically. It doesn't just tell you the what, but it tells you the how. I don't hold anything back. It's a live stream with my clients. So they're asking me questions. I designed it to give the most comprehensive way of starting shadow work. So not just learning about it, but actually starting shadow work. So go and download it. If you're into shadow work, I promise you it will really substantially change your life. Cameron, please, is there anything that you want to let the kind
So
viewership know?
if you're watching from my channel, definitely go check out Aaron's. He has a different shade and a different tone in speaking about this,
Yeah,
but something that I think is deeply valuable for anyone who resonates with me, probably resonate with Aaron too. And so I have linked his channel down below. If you are resonating with what we're speaking about, then I highly recommend you reaching out on either Instagram or even just down below on YouTube. And I look forward to connecting. We can take it further together.
perfect. Also, that course that I mentioned from me is completely free. It's not paid. I forgot to say that. But yeah, I'm so glad everyone was here. I hope this was valuable for everyone. Any questions, let us know. We're happy to do questions and answers on this podcast and dive into topics that the community really cares about. But other than that, we'll see you later.